Arsenal are set to get back under Premier League action tomorrow away from home in the furthest trip they have during the season to Newcastle. Mikel Arteta faces the press to give the latest team news, but there's hope that a big player is returning very soon. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part indeed of your morning routines. I hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing well, and let's say good morning to those joining us live in the chat box this morning. Ara Silky, Blackshine, Tom, Franklin, Stevie, Olawale, Paul, Damien, James. We've got Omateo. We've got Mr. Ree, we've got Glenn and Lars, we've got Alex and Terry. Good morning to Louis and Jiti, and more in the chat box as always. Please do, if you could be ever so kind, to drop a like on the video. That would be great. That would be fantastic. It'd be incredibly humbling if you could. So thank you. Not loads to discuss actually today. It's not a busy Friday, and that usually is the way when it comes in the kind of in-between state. We're in that purgatorial period between the last game and the next game, and news will, of course, flow this afternoon with Mikel Arteta's press conference taking place later on today, and he will face the media. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we start with an interesting story from the Mail. Ihsan Khan from the Mail reporting yesterday and claiming that Arsenal are offering £17,500 per year fees to St John's to lure the country's best stars away from Manchester City. This report went out yesterday. It's a regime that supposedly mirrors Man City's own and is designed where Arsenal basically have like a way of convincing young players with these benefits to sign for Arsenal. The school, of course, involves a pitch that has the same irrigation system as the Emirates, a £1 million fee being paid to West Ham for a player likened to Jude Bellingham, and transport on demand. It's also seen Manchester City seek permission from the Premier League to lower the age of their programme below Arsenal's. So some interesting tactics going on, reportedly, behind the scenes in order for Arsenal to strengthen their pool of talented youngsters coming through and to try and cherry pick and to kind of bring in the best young players in the country, if indeed these reports are accurate. And it is Ihsan Khan of the Mail that's reported on them yesterday. We know Arsenal's young players, Ethan Nwaneri, has been a fantastic talent coming through. It's the place where Nwaneri went, according to the report, and Arsenal seemingly benefited from that with now one of the best young players in the world at the club. So let's see if there's any fallout from this story. Of course, anything that we do, we will be talking about it as any stories from this develop. Meanwhile, the big story of yesterday, broken by Simon Collins of the Evening Standard, is that Martin Odegaard is supposedly targeting a return to play against Inter Milan next week. Now, this has led, of course, there to be some speculation that he could even make the team, could make the squad for the game against Newcastle this Saturday. That would be a very big surprise, but he has been working on the grass for a little while now. It's only a few more boxes that need to be ticked. Mikel Arteta speaking in a previous press conference, of course, about this. We know that he's been getting ever closer to making that big return to things, and seeing Martin Odegaard back in the squad at what is such, as we know, a very important period of the season would be huge for Arsenal, would be massive for us. Arteta said ahead of the Preston game, he said he's been on the grass for a few weeks, but there are still a few boxes to tick. How fast we can do that last stage on the rehab is a question we have to answer when we have players around and he starts competing with the team, something he hasn't done yet. And that was, of course, on Tuesday. So the idea that he would be back in the squad this weekend, having not yet trained with the team, would be a big push, a big leap. But it is Martin Odegaard who does continue to surprise everybody. But it's a massive boost to have potentially Martin Odegaard returning to the squad. I think we can all agree that we have missed him massively had we had him available for games against the likes of Bournemouth, against the likes of Liverpool. I think things may have been different. The same can be said for Bukayo Saka, especially against Bournemouth as well. And now Saka is back and an absolute asset to the team. Inter Milan next week. Arsenal travel to San Siro to play their toughest Champions League opponent of their league phase. Having Odegaard back for that would be a big, big boost indeed. But that final story to discuss is Mikel Arteta's press conference. It takes place a little bit later on this afternoon, where he will be facing questions from the media and the journalists, of course, that will be attending. And it's not surprising at all that a lot of those questions, I think, will be dominated by the question marks around team news, around the squad. So the press conference, actually, I can tell you, is at 9 a.m. today. So it's less than an hour away until that press conference gets underway, and you'll be able to hear all about it. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing and hearing what Mikel Arteta has got to say. If you're listening to this on catch-up, you probably will already know what Mikel Arteta has said going into this one. But there's questions expected on team news. There's questions expected on Newcastle. I imagine he'll probably be questioned about the refereeing of the game last season and his press conference. I remember that very vividly because I was in that press conference and asked him the infamous question, which got him quite riled. And we all know the fallout from that story. We know the fallout of what happened after that, and the disgrazia that was talked about in the proceedings from that, which was very, very entertaining indeed. But yes, that's all of today's stories. Not loads, but there isn't loads to go off because tomorrow is match day. Of course, we'll be bringing you a preview show a little bit later on this afternoon. I'll be putting a message into our Discord server to get some interested parties involved in our preview ahead of the game. We'll be talking about our lineups, which will be talking about our predictions. That's 5 o'clock UK time that you'll be able to hear that. So make sure you get involved with that a little bit later on this afternoon. Right, let's go to part 2 though, and your questions right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show where we tackle some of your questions and more. So if you've got any questions you'd like to ask, and I will do my absolute best to try and answer them for you. If you could also drop a like on the video, that would be massively appreciated. So without further ado, let's get cracking and jump into these. Temmie says, thoughts on Odegaard's Danish cousin playing for Bologna. What are my thoughts on it? I mean, we've seen a number of players that have got family members playing. I don't think it is his cousin, is it? I mean, his name is Jens Odegaard, so it's a different name. I don't know if they are related. I doubt it because their names are different. So, it's. I don't think, Temmie, they're in the same bracket. Damien says, what kit do you think we will wear this weekend? The away kit will be 2 black and the home kit will be 2 white. So like Spurs is. Of course, I think that we will wear the home kit with red shorts. I think it might be the home kit with red shorts. If not, it might be this one. We might end up wearing this one. I don't think it's 2 white, the third kit. So, yeah, it might be this one that we wear. There's been no suggestions yet. We usually wear red, but as we know, because of the North London derby, it was thought that Arsenal's home kit was too much of a clash with Spurs' white home kit. So they made us change to the black kit for that North London derby, which is a very different one. But yeah, very, very different indeed. Franklin says you can have cousins with different surnames. I know that, but the point is that I think that it's very clear this was a joke about Odegaard rather than Odegaard's. But yeah, I know that. Lauren says, other than Isak, which player, if any, would you take from Newcastle? I think the obvious answer for most would be Bruno Guimaraes. He's been absolutely fantastic. Anthony Gordon has been another player that's been also very good for Newcastle too. Even Lewis Hall's been coming on a lot this season at left back. He's been improving a lot. There's actually expectations that he'll probably start the game on their left-hand side, which I think actually might suit Arsenal. Hall up against Saka, something that maybe we would want to see. King says, any information on Ben White's injury? Arteta said we lost him in the last presser. He said that there was a load-bearing management of the player. So I think it's only minor. I don't think it's anything too much to worry about. But again, Mikel Arteta will be talking about, I'm sure, in his press conference. And Michael says Tonali, of course, Tonali back in the Newcastle squad following the completion of his ban. He will be with the team and starting against Arsenal this weekend. So it's a chance to see how he's getting on also. Bosses, I feel like when Odegaard comes back, it will be like the Dubai training camp that Arsenal had in the Dubai training camp we had, Arsenal returned from that and went on an unbelievable run, and really did benefit from that. So the benefit Arsenal will get from having Odegaard back in the group, back in the squad, having their captain available, I think will be huge. So, I'm looking forward to it. King says, I have my reservations on Sterling, I think for obvious reasons. He played well against Preston, in my opinion, though. Just wanted to know what's your opinion on Sterling at the moment. I mean, King, I've got my concerns. I think that he's had some poor performances. I think he's had some concerning performances. I think the Shakhtar Donetsk substitution performance was borderline unacceptable. The lack of application, the frustration surrounding his application was very, very concerning indeed. But I've seen some sprightly moments. I've seen some encouraging moments. I've seen things that make me think he's a good asset to have off the bench and, depth of squad for rotational purposes. But at the moment, we are yet to see the best of him. And that's what he said, that we would see the best of him, and we're yet to see that. So, let's see if Sterling can provide Arsenal with more throughout the course of the campaign. Anger says, is Gabriel still a doubt? No, White or Gabriel could be a problem in terms of centre-back options. Gabriel is yes, still a doubt as far as I'm aware, unless Mikel Arteta reveals something in his presser later on this morning. But at the moment in time, yes, he still is a doubt going into this game. And I don't expect that to change. I'd be very surprised if somehow he was quickly back. But it was only thought to be a minor problem with his knee. So that's obviously made things somewhat easier to be more positive about. Ben thinks that Sterling looks much better on the left-hand side. Of course, we saw him play. I think he was on the right, wasn't he, playing? I mean, Gabriel Jesus kind of like flitted around the pitch quite fluidly, but Martinelli was on the left, Sterling on the right against Preston. I think his best role is probably best on the left hand side, but I think he offers us depth on both sides. He gives you a substitution, he gives you a rotation, he gives you depth for these cup games if you need him. So, and I do think that he offers more, and he will offer more than Reece Nelson does, but I guess we'll have to wait and see as more performances come out from him. Patrick says, I'm flying to London tonight. Any recommendation of where to watch the Newcastle game tomorrow? I mean, you've got your obvious candidates, your Tollingtons, your 12 pins as well. There are a number of places that you can go to watch the Arsenal game. If Sean's watching the show, I'm sure he'll give people some recommendations if he wants to divulge his broad knowledge of North London's establishments. But there's the obvious ones if you want to watch them with a lot of other supporters. Those are probably the biggest ones as well. So, it's been a long time since I've watched like a game in the pub. We did watch a game in what was the Arsenal Tavern previously. It's now... What's it called now? The Arsenal Tavern. It's now called Brookgate, is what it's called now. Finsbury Parkway. We watched the Wolves away game there with a few of the listeners last season. So, it was all right in there. It's not too bad. There's a few suggestions for you. Even says, have you heard the Kai Havertz song on Spotify? No, I haven't, Evan. I haven't heard that at all. Freddie says, do you think Gabriel will make it for tomorrow? No idea. I'd be very surprised, though. Akubra says, football is football, but do you have superstitions on the kits? And if so, what's yours for this season? Meaning, do you look at the most winning kit when facing certain teams, despite when to wear them? I personally don't. I can be quite superstitious about certain things, but that's not really one of the things that I am superstitious about. What kits we win the most in. There was a kit where I think, was it like the black kit that was like my favorite kit? We had a really poor record in that kit. And there was another one, was there? What was the other one that we had a really poor record in? It was like the black one with like the diagonal turquoise, white and gold stripe at the bottom of it a few years ago. We had a really bad record in that as well. So I don't really read too much into that. I know that there are preferences. It's important as well because players need to identify um, kind of each other on the field in terms of the kits, and sometimes the broad changes. There was, I think the pink kit we had, was it last season or the season before last? We wore that like twice. I don't know if that was because they felt as though it wasn't a very good kit to wear in terms of kind of like visibility of your teammates. So all of those things, I think. Paul says suggesting try the Bank of Friendship as a potential place to go to watch games as well. Temi says, would you be able to live with Slot winning the league if we do a cup sweep? I mean, would I be able to live with it? Of course, football's a hobby. It's not my life. So yeah, I'd definitely be able to live with it, Temi. But it would be an unbelievable achievement for Slot to go and win the league in his first season. Of course, it's a different scenario with Liverpool than it was for Arsenal when Arteta took over. Slot's inherited an unbelievable squad there, and a squad that was already competing for titles prior to his arrival, whereas of course Arsenal were falling away further and further down the league. But at the same time, I think that Arsenal have got a great opportunity of winning cup competitions this season, and have also got a chance of winning the league still, which is also very important. Yeah, Angus says, Temi, I don't think Tom would die. No, I wouldn't die if Slot was to win the league. It wouldn't be the end of me if Slot won the league. I'd probably just get on with my summer and ignore Arsenal for a little bit. King says, Odegaard and Saka are never usually injured, so I get why Arteta has allowed Reece, Smith Rowe and Vieira to go. However, I think it's just plain naive to leave us so light in attack. I mean, we have replaced the players that left. I mean, Reece left, we brought in Sterling. Smith Rowe left, we brought in Marino. Vieira left, we've brought through Waneri. Like, it's not like we haven't replaced those players. Those players have been replaced. It's just incredibly difficult to land players of the requisite quality in certain positions. And I think that is ultimately where we find ourselves, is we find ourselves in a position where, yes, we know that we need another attacker. And I think particularly you look at the centre forward position and Eddie Nketiah's departure, and you look at that and think, do we have enough centre forward options? You've got Havertz, you've got Jesus, you've got Trossard, who can also play there. Do we have enough? I think we need one more attacker, but Arsenal aren't going to sign players for the sake of signing players. It also wasn't like Eddie Nketiah was widely well regarded by the majority of the fan base either, and everybody felt that he should also be moved on. Reece Nelson was an exit that I definitely criticised. You could argue that maybe Sterling is more of a replacement for, in that sense, for Nketiah, because I felt like when we were bringing in Sterling on deadline day, I was hoping that we would keep Reece Nelson, because Sterling can also operate as a centre forward type player and has done in the past. So I think it was more about, I was, and you watched the deadline day shows. I was questioning why, we allowed Reece Nelson also to go, but then I found out the players were pushing to leave. Smith Rowe, Ramsdale, Reece. These players pushed for their exits. They pushed to get more minutes. They pushed to leave the club. They wanted to go. They wanted to leave the club. They wanted to take on a new challenge, and so Arsenal were keen to make that happen. Sometimes they don't. Think about Kivior. Kivior was also open to leaving, but Arsenal basically shut the door on that because of the situation at the back line. And it's very hard to bring in replacements and bring in players of the requisite quality that are happy knowing they're going to be behind Saka, knowing they're going to be behind Odegaard. It's hard to bring those players in. It's a very big challenge, but it's something that we're going to need to try and achieve next summer, that's for sure. Ryan says the biggest credit that you can give Klopp is how he left the squad when he left. It's not just Klopp either. It's, the wider context of Liverpool's recruitment and the squad building over the years. Liverpool have done very, very well in how they've built the squad with Klopp there. Absolutely deserves credit for the way in which the squad was left when he decided to move on, that the next manager was going to inherit a big squad. You couldn't say that about Arsenal when Arsene Wenger left. You couldn't say that about Arsenal when Unai Emery left. And that's not on Unai Emery, really. It's more so on Wenger than Emery. And it's also on the executives behind the scenes. But of course, there was major upheaval when Arsene Wenger left. Soon after that, Ivan Gazidis left, and we were bringing in likes of Raul Sanllehi and Sven Mislintat. These executives came to the squad, had their stamp on the club, and the idea was that Wenger would leave, and Raul Sanllehi, Sven Mislintat, and and Husfami as well, another person who was behind the scenes at the time, would help to kind of deal with the departure of Wenger, but it hasn't worked. It didn't work out, and Arsenal had to drastically change their setup. We've seen Edu come in as technical and now sporting director. Richard Garlick came in as head of footballing operations and now managing director. We're seeing James King return in that role that Richard Garlick previously was in. We've seen Josh Kroenke take a much more active role in the club from a higher up perspective. Tim Lewis, of course, has come into the club and is also a very big influence and decision maker at the club and works very closely with the ownership and with Edu as well. We have completely transformed this club from an executive level to a coaching level to a player level in the space of 5 years, and that's very impressive. Whereas Arne Slot's coming into an already established setup that's already competed for titles, already built a brilliant squad. It's totally different. You will get some pretty reductive opinions about it. Obviously, people that choose to ignore all of those factors and just look at football in more of a binary way, of course you will. But the reality is, as is described there, that is it's night and day between Arteta coming in at Arsenal and Slot coming in at Liverpool. Watermelon says Babs has reported that there's a possible 60 million deal for Gyökeres. Is there any truth to that? I don't think Babs is the guy reporting. I think Babs is reporting on a report about Gyökeres. Of course, there's been suggestions that Gyökeres could leave Sporting for an agreed 60 million. That's the suggestions that have emerged from, I think, some aspects of British media. I'm clicking on our report at the moment. Let me just have a quick look and see where specifically. Apparently, the Sun are claiming that Arsenal would want to negotiate a fee in the region of 50-60 million pounds. Sporting are prepared to raise funds through the sale of other players, including Ousmane Dembele and Gonçalo Inácio. I'm not sure for the reasons why. Their intention is selling other first-team stars, apparently, as opposed to... Oh, this is a report from a long time ago. Hold on. Let me try and find a more up-to-date one. Let me see if there's anything else. Florian Pletterberg, who is, of course, I think, Sky Germany. There is an agreement that Victor Gyökeres can leave Sporting next summer for 60 to 70 million euros. A move in the winter is currently not planned. A transfer in the summer is very likely. In England, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool and Chelsea are specifically interested in the 26-year-old. So, I mean, Florian Pletterberg's pretty well established. He's got some good connections. I don't think he's got 100% accuracy, but I think he's got some pretty well thought of connections. But it's not Bavs obviously reporting that. That's the aggregation of news as happens across platforms, happens here. Yasin says, how's Eddie getting on at Palace? Not particularly great. I don't think he's been playing in his best position. He's been played mainly kind of out on a wide role because they've got Mateta playing through the middle. So I do feel for the guy a little bit because he's not playing in the role that I think he expected to play in. So it's difficult to really judge what's going on. It's not given the best start to life there at all. Let's go to Gary. He says, Isak's just starting to hit a bit of form, and I've got a feeling that he will get 2 tomorrow, he says Gary. Gary not looking forward to seeing him either. Angry Pacifist, I'd rather get Šeško than Gyökeres. I mean, Šeško's only scored in 1 Bundesliga game all season. So I'm not in alignment with you on that right now. His record in the Bundesliga is 8 games played, 1 game he has scored in. He scored in 2 of the 3 Champions League games, and he scored in 2 of the 4 UEFA Nations League games for Slovenia, including a hat-trick against Kazakhstan. But Gyökeres' record this season has been far more impressive than Šeško's. Far more impressive indeed. He's got 16 goals in 15 games. He's scoring at a rate of knots. He's scoring regularly. He's only not scored in 1 game in the Portuguese league this season, and he's already picked up 2 braces and a hat-trick in other games this season as well. In fact, his record in the Portuguese league is 12 goals in 9 matches. So of the 2, based upon what we're seeing at the moment, I think you'd have to lean towards Gyökeres right now. Akubra says, not underestimating Newcastle, but after them we have a pretty difficult run. I'd hold Odegaard until Chelsea. I think that they will be very, cautious. They'll be very cautious indeed about when they decide to introduce and how they introduce Martin Odegaard to the fold at the respective clubs. Keiko says, I have always been content with the current squad. However, we have had spells against Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Liverpool that have convinced me that we need a killer up front forward, and Gyökeres is built for our system. This is a point of view I struggle with slightly. The reason being is that the Bournemouth game should not be on that list, because the Bournemouth game had nothing to do with the lack of a centre forward. The Bournemouth game obviously had the caveat of being played with 10 men for 60 minutes, but actually it was the service to the centre forward that was considerably lacking. The idea of swapping out Havertz for Gyökeres in the game against Bournemouth would have changed nothing. In fact, it could have even made it worse, because the difference being is that Havertz also drops in deep, helps link up play and creates himself. So I'm surprised that you've included Bournemouth in that list of fixtures. Shakhtar, we were more dominant, so potentially we might have scored more goals if Gyökeres was in the team. And then when it comes to the Liverpool game, of course, Arsenal, I think deserved more than they got. We were missing players. The injuries against a very good side, I think, did pay, and losing players, particularly in defence, allowed Liverpool back into the game with more dominance. Saka wasn't fully fit, and we lost him in the second half. So I'm struggling with that view a little bit, Keiko, because I think it's very easily explained away why a centre forward is not the biggest miss of those games. I think it's much more that we didn't use Nwaneri, perhaps, and we don't have yet a kind of a more accomplished competitor to Odegaard besides Nwaneri, and we don't know how many minutes he's going to get. I think that was the bigger miss. We missed a creative figure in those games more than we missed a Gyökeres type striker for those games. Yasin says Gyökeres is the one we need, in my opinion. He's a killer and a powerhouse. Freddie says, if we really want Gyökeres, then we have to move for him before United do with their new manager. Of course, with Ruben Amorim expected to join Manchester United in the coming weeks. There's been emphasis on maybe Man United going in for him. It would be strange if they did, considering how much money they've spent on Rasmus Højlund and on Joshua Zirkzee and having brought in Chido Obi-Martin, but never say never. Franklin Goodwood says Martinelli's missed chance was definitely a factor in the loss. I mean, if Martinelli scores that goal when we go 1-0 up, I have no doubt in my mind that I think we beat Bournemouth 1-0 with 10 men. Sadly, he missed it, and we went on to lose that game. But I think that if he scores that, we probably go on to win the game 1-0. But ifs, buts, maybes, it's all relative, isn't it? Anyway, that's going to bring us to an end of today's show. I'll be back with you today, actually, 5 o'clock UK time, preview show looking ahead to tomorrow's game against Newcastle. I'm heading off now to a press conference, just not an Arsenal press conference, because I'm heading off to Tottenham's training ground to cover Ange Postecoglou, because our good colleague friend of ours, Ali Gold, is away this week. So I'm going to be covering him and hearing from the Spurs manager after their disappointing run in the Premier League, but also a return to form when they beat Manchester City and knocked them out of the League Cup, and of course have since been drawn against Manchester United as well. And Van der Ven being injured, I'm sure we'll hear some updates on that. So yeah, off to Spurs today. That's football. That's working in the game. That's what you have to do. Got to swallow your pride, swallow your club sometimes, and grit your teeth and do your job. That's how it works. But no, very professional as always. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay happy. And as always, up the Arsenal.